Welcome, folks. Welcome to the first edition of Just Apply. You know why this session is called Just Apply? Because I like applying things, and I'm sure you do too. I don't like the theoretical knowledge. So, when we cover books in these sessions, we're also going to talk about how you can apply them and if you can't apply them in situations. So, we might also diss the authors if it's not applicable at all. So, we're going to go into a lot more details, and as I promised, or as I mentioned, that I'll be going for a nerd but yet rockstar kind of look. So I hope I kind of did justice to that. As you can see, this is our first episode, and I have not really rehearsed anything. I don't really have any pre-written script. I just have some notes from the book, and we're going to go into a lot more details about it. Hopefully, at the end of it, you will be at a point to actually apply the principles of the book and just get a summary out of it while with a quick glance if you want. So let's get into it. So let's start with the authors themselves. So there's four authors to this book, and I'll introduce the name of the book later. So let's start with the authors themselves. Let's introduce them. So the first author is Kerry Patterson. Okay, he's a professor of econometrics. Econometrics is just using statistics to test or develop hypotheses for finance or economics. All right. He works at the University of Reading, UK. He's also won several accolades in his contribution in organizational behavior. Okay, did his doctoral work in this at Stanford University. So I think a pretty accomplished author, I would say. Joseph Graney is another author. She's a keynote speaker and corporate consultant, primarily influencing corporate change initiatives. Founded Unitas to make poor people economically self-reliant. And that's a very good initiative, I would say. Rock Macmillan, okay, speaker and consultant again, is primarily working with organizations on leadership development. I would say a very similar sort of a role like John Maxwell plays, right? Al Switzer, another speaker and consultant to multiple Forbes 500 companies, also faculty on the Executive Development Center at the University of Michigan. So all these people mostly come from academics background and have worked with corporations on different initiatives lead in organizational behavior or leadership development, right? Now, the book that we're talking about today is Crucial Conversations. So, what is Crucial Conversations? First of all, let's talk about the book itself. Crucial Conversations. What does it mean? When does a conversation become crucial? Why does it even being called Crucial Conversation? So, let's think about it. If you think about a conversation where the stakes were high for you, in a way that you didn't want to lose the person or piss the person off, really, you still wanted the relationship. It was not like you just wanted to gain everything and then screw that person, right? You really wanted to have the relationship, but at the same time you also wanted what you want, right? Now that's something what's called when you have such a conversation with someone, that's something what's called a crucial conversation. When your ears are burning up and you know the stake is high and you still want to preserve the relationship, but you still want to cover an important topic with the person, how do you approach that problem, right? Interestingly, for most of us, that tingling sensation, the heating up of our ears in this that conversation, or this, or let's say the fear that comes out of thinking about the outcome of that conversation, sometimes stops us even from having the conversation. And that's what we talk about as crucial conversation. Usually when we have such situations, we tend to fail at them, and if you're not skilled at it, first of all, and you'll be in a random shower and you'll have some ideas. Okay, I could have said this in that conversation. I could have said this, and things would have been different. The outcome would have been different. Every other thought like that tends to hit us while we are in a shower and thinking of a conversation that we had like a month, 2 months, or maybe a year earlier, right? And it sticks in our head because the outcome was important to us, but we screwed it up bad. So that's really what is a crucial conversation. How do you handle it? Okay, or rather, I would say not a handle it, but rather how would you effectively have a conversation, okay, which is crucial to you. So let's talk about the book itself. Okay, we talked about generally what is crucial conversation, what is the need for the book, right? Now, the approach to the book by the authors. So let's cover that a bit. The approach towards the book, covering the topic or different aspects of the topic, the authors have made a sincere effort in giving tools to handle situations or have crucial conversations. They also develop or covered a basis for psychology behind what happens when you have such conversation, or when you are at when things are at stake. what happens, how do we act, why do we act in a certain way. So the authors do cover in some extent of that. Now, the approach towards the topic is very methodical, I would say, because they give a lot of tools. They give a large number of mnemonics, first of all, to deal with different aspects of a conversation, and they kind of define that in detail. Now, the challenge with this, okay, with all of this, is that you have to have practice in order to actually apply these tools. Okay, this is not something that you can just read and you'll be able to just hit it right out the park. No, you have to practice it diligently. There's no secret to it. Okay, so the topic or the method to itself is slightly theoretical, in the sense that these topics or these conversations that they have pointed out, the tools they have pointed out, are in general applied in the examples they are given, are shown to have been applied to, let's say, more non-conflict scenarios. Okay, when I mean non-conflict, which means that the underlying assumption there is that the other person is usually a good person. Okay, that's the underlying assumption. It's a rational person, it's a reasonable person. Okay, that's the underlying assumption behind this entire book. Right, so that's where we get started. Now, let's talk about the learnings and techniques from the book, what they have mentioned, and also I'll share some of my personal experiences applying certain learnings from this book. All right, so let's start there. Now, beginning with this, I think it begins with a simple logical thought. When you have a conversation, there's four things you have to ask yourself, really. So, look, is what do you want out of the conversation? What does the other person want out of that conversation? What do I want for that relationship? Remember, I said that you want to preserve the relationship. This is not something where you just want to screw that person, get what you want, and get over with it. No, this is not that. This is essentially for a time when you want the relationship to be preserved, but at the same time, you want to get what you want. Okay, how do you approach this problem? So, what do I want? What does the other person want? What do I want for the relationship? And how would I act if I really wanted that to happen? So, that's where the four questions you ask, and it's pretty logical assumption, or let's say pretty logical thought process to begin with, right? Because you're really thinking rationally here, right? Now, how does a crucial conversation get screwed up? Okay, the book talks about one specific aspect of why conversations get screwed up is when people are having this conversation and they fail to notice the signs of how a person is going to silence or violence, as they describe it. Now, silence is something like the person is not really talking to you openly, or giving you one word answers, or really just avoiding the topic altogether, or having less conversation with you. That's really when a person has had a conversation with you, they didn't like it, and now they are going to silence, right? Avoiding it in general. Then there's the other aspect to it, when you have had the conversation and now the other person is going to violence, which is basically they're fed up of you, and now they are going to more violent responses like name calling, or maybe sometimes it could be physical as well, right? So that's the two different signs that happens when you are having a crucial conversation, and yet people tend to miss them, thinking that that's just the how the other person is. Well, not really, and the book actually covers why is that the case. So we'll talk about it. So have to be very careful to, first of all, to observe these signs. Okay, and one of the ways that the book talks about is whenever you're having this conversation, right, a crucial conversation, and you feel that the other person is going to silence or violence, okay, and there are other characteristics that they portray. In general, your goal should be then to make it safe. What it means is make the environment safe such that the person doesn't go into silence and violence, sticks with you. Okay, so making the environment safe, and they provide techniques for it. All right, so it starts with apologizing. Now, what I mean by apologizing is that, or what the authors mean is that you don't get softer on your tone. What essentially it's saying is that if there's a misunderstanding, say that it's a misunderstanding and apologize for it. Okay, hey, I didn't mean to. I apologize if you felt it that way. I didn't mean to. So that's one thing to start with. You apologize. Okay, create a safe environment. Make it safe for the other person that you didn't have bad intention. That's the first step, right? The second is contrast. Now, contrast is basically meaning that once you have said like, "Oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to," What the next step is really to contrast with what has happened. So you say something, hey, I didn't want this to happen. What I actually wanted was this. So essentially, you're contrasting what I didn't want versus what I do want. Okay, so you're using a contrasting principle there. That's basically what it is. So you're making the environment safe for the other person to come back into the safe space, come back from the silence or violence characteristics that they have started showing, right? So always be on the lookout. Okay, start with heart. And again, when I say start with heart, is basically think that the other person is a rational, reasonable person who doesn't want to inflict anything bad on you, doesn't want anything negative for you. Okay, it's a reasonable, rational person who just has a disagreement, let's say. That's where the crucial conversation agenda lies altogether, where you want to preserve the relationship, and the basic assumption is that the other person is not a bad person. Okay, now moving forward, the other thing to do here is crib, as a mnemonic that they gave, crib. Okay, we'll talk about crib, but essentially what's happening is that, okay, when you have apologized, you have contrasted, you need something more to then take the conversation further. Now what is that? What is that something more? See, idea is, when you're having conversation, chances are, okay, the conversation is missing an important piece. That's why there's a disagreement. That's why there's a person going silence and violence, right? So crib essentially talks about now taking the conversation further, where you can actually have a solution. How do you do that? It's based on this mnemonic. Generally speaking, when there's a disagreement and people are going out of the conversation, usually is because they feel that they can't get what they want, right? Which means that they feel that their purpose will not be served. So crib essentially talks about finding a common purpose and achieving it. So here's what it is. C, crib, CRIB. C stands for commit to seek a mutual purpose. Okay, which means a purpose that is agreeable to you both. For example, let's say your wife wants to spend some time together uh, with you and wants to go out with you, right? But her agenda is to spend time together, and that's why she wants to go out with you. Your agenda is that you want to relax at home and spend time together. Now the mutual part in this is that you both want to spend time together. So how do you do that, where you are both spending time together? So first, identifying that you both have a mutual purpose. Okay, so coming to seek a mutual purpose, right? Then this R stands for recognize the purpose behind the strategy. So when you say that someone wants us to go out, okay, you have to recognize the purpose. All right. Now, if you fail to recognize that purpose, you will fail the entire conversation, because the other person's strategy is to go out while your strategy is to stay in, right? So you both are at different strategies, but you're not identified a common purpose, right? So commit and recognize a common purpose. Okay. If there's no common purpose, then invent a mutual purpose. Okay, invent something that is mutually agreeable. For example, again, let's say you want to do so. Let's say your wife or any of your partner wants to do some activity, or your friend wants to do an activity. Okay, but let's say you both are in business together, and there's something that you value and you want to get done. Now you have to commit to finding or invent a mutual purpose, rather. Now, what I mean is that you set up a long term goal, for example, which is mutually beneficial for both, then there's a higher likelihood or chance that the other person will listen to you more. Okay, so inventing a mutual purpose is a strategy that you want to use in order to actually gain the other person's trust and actually move forward in the conversation and have their agreement into something. Okay, you're not looking to rip someone off. All you're saying is that you want both of us to be happy, right? Get what they want. Now, the next part of it, once you've identified a mutual purpose or invented a mutual purpose, the next thing to do is now brainstorm new strategies. So let's say you want to do something, the other person doesn't want to do something. Now you have to brainstorm new strategies on how you can achieve that mutual purpose. So maybe you can come to a common ground. Let's say a couple of days you do what they want, couple of days they do what you want, something like that. Okay, essentially crib is saying that if there's no mutual purpose, find a mutual purpose. If there is a mutual purpose, recognize the mutual purpose, and then commit to find a strategy that allows you to go to that purpose. All right, that's basically it. Now, in order to do something like this, you have to have two things. Okay, when you want to seek mutual purpose, you have to have mutual respect established. What I mean by that is that the other person should know that you respect them and you value and respect their opinions and their requirements, or let's say their needs. If the other person feels that that's not the case, then no matter how much of mutual purpose you want to define, if they don't see that respect in you, they are not going to come in. Everything falls down to respect. So finding the mutual respect or showing that you have the respect for them is essential. This is another classic example that the book shares, where it talks about what if the issue is about sexual harassment, and how do you encounter it. Now the first issue is that, let's say if it's subtle, okay, you cannot be exactly qualified as harassment, but at the same time you feel that something is not appropriate, let's say in office space. So how do you deal with that? Well, the book talks about, if there's something like that, you have to bring the topic up, but at the same time you can't accuse the other person of harassing you while at the same time trying to resolve an issue. So you have to show that you respect that person, but at the same time you want to discuss a few things that only you two can resolve together. And if you still feel that, okay, no, this was too way out of hand, then report to your HR and the company about the issue. But in general, that's what the book talks about. Okay, how do you handle such a scenario? Okay, how do you deal with it and come out strong, such that the relationship is not destroyed with, let's say, your co-worker. You can still work together, but at the same time there's some boundaries set. Okay, how do you get to that point? So you have to have some mutual respect. Now I don't know how one can do that. Let's say if I'm feeling harassed sexually, I don't know how much of a mutual respect I can have for the other person, right? Now here's the interesting thing. The book suggests that maybe it's harassment, or maybe I'm feeling that I'm being harassed, okay, because of certain actions of other person that makes me want to tell a story to myself that makes me feel that I'm sexually harassed. I don't know if that makes sense. So essentially, the feelings are based out of some actions of the other person, which arouse an action, emotion in me, which causes another action from my end, right? So it's a revert to the action of the other person based on what I felt from their actions. So the sexual harassment may or may not have been sexual harassment. They might not be aware. Okay, so it's giving them benefit of the doubt, essentially, that it may or may not be their fault, and they might not be aware of it. So they might just want to be brought that to their attention. But if we tell ourselves a story incriminating them, then there's no way we can establish mutual respect. So there's the second part that you look at, is whenever there's a feeling like that, something like that we feel betrayed about, or let's say angry about, okay, the first things foremost thing to do is to backtrack your step, which is basically what action you are looking to take out of currently. Check the emotion that is created, that is causing you to take that action. Then analyze the story that you told yourself that has caused that emotion. So for example, if you've always felt that, if you've told yourself story that this person is wanting to harass me, this person really wants my let's say take benefit of me, okay, if you've told yourself that story, then the emotion will be created, something like that, where you're angry, you're betrayed, or something else, and then you'll be urged, itching to actually take some action on that end. But what if your initial emotion is wrong and the story that you've told yourself actually is clouding your judgment? So it says then go back to the facts. Okay, so retrace your path from what action you're looking to take. Check the emotion that created that is wanting you to take that action. Analyze the story that you told that caused that emotion, and then go back to the facts. What were the real facts, right? So how to approach the conversation when you are in such a phase, and I think the authors agree to this, that it is mere impossible to do it, okay, when you are in a heated conversation. It's almost impossible to do it, right? But the authors agree to it, and the point that they make is that you have to practice it. It cannot be done in one go. You cannot just read a book and you'll be done. So they too recommend practicing it. So moving further, how do you approach that conversation? So it starts with another mnemonic, okay? State. So state your facts with the other person. Tell your story. Ask the other person what do you they think about your facts and the story that you've shared. Talk tentatively, which means don't talk decisively. Talk, hey, I'm not sure, but this is what I felt, okay, based on these facts and the story that I'm telling you. So everything is tentative, nothing is absolute, so that you are inviting others to actually test, okay. So the next part is encourage testing state, right? The last is encourage testing. So having to invite others to test that is important, because otherwise you've already made your decision and there's no point having the conversation, and no one will come to that conversation at all. They will all feel the same thing, right? Where do we get stuck and conversations blow out of proportions? And the book mentions this an important point. We wait too much to have that conversation. We avoid that conversation for a longer period of time, thinking it's not a big deal, even though it is, but it keeps accumulating inside of us time over time until it blows out of proportion, where we just flip out on our boss, or we flip out on our colleague, or we flip out on our partner, and things are just ruined forever, right? So we don't want to do that, and that's where we get stuck and the conversations blow out of proportion. And it talks about, the book mentions there's three stories people usually tell themselves when they are avoiding such a conversation. Either it's a victim story where they feel that they are the victim and this is something that happens to them a lot, or they tell a villain story where they villainize the other person even though that there's no need. So let's say a person committed a mistake and you didn't confront them. Now everything they do which may not align with your views or you disagree with, you start villainizing them as if everything they do is to hurt you. Okay, so that's another part. And the third part is nothing can be done or you feel helpless. Now that's the worst thing I feel, right? Where you corner yourself up in a sucker's choice, saying that it is what it is, nothing can be done. And when that's the case, it is bound to go or blow out of proportion one day, okay? Because you cannot be accumulating things. Either it's going to be harmful for you or the other person, either way, or obviously the relationship is going to be ruined anyway, right? So don't wait. Now, how to encourage testing, right? You talked about state your facts, tell your story, but you have to encourage testing as well. You can't just make a decision, right? So how do you encourage testing? So they have another mnemonic for it, which is AMPP. All right, basically ask the other person's opinion about how do you feel about this, what I've shared. Okay, that's asking. Then they talk about mirroring. Okay, mirroring is basically saying what they've already said, whatever the other person has said, okay, or felt. Say, you just mirror it. So saying something, hey, you say that there's no problem, but your tone of voice tells me something else, that there is a problem, right? So you're mirroring what they're actually telling, not telling you, but kind of speaking to you with their tone of voice or with their actions, right? Then the other part is paraphrasing. So let's say if they share with you, okay, you paraphrase what they've shared. So you're saying to me that because this has happened, you feel that I have this intention towards you. So you're paraphrasing what they've shared. And the last thing is priming. Now, priming is very important. Priming is like, as they share in the example, it's like how you prime a well, right? Or a hand pump, right? Where you have to prime it for some time before actual water comes out. This is tricky, and actually it is risky as well. If you're not sure exactly what would be the issue, you won't be aware of how to handle the issue altogether. Let's say there was a union problem, okay, and some budgets were cut off and some work hours were increased, and there was a reason behind it, and a good reason. But okay, let's say the company was going into loss and they had, in order to keep it viable, they had to do it. But the workers feel that you are taking advantage of them and you just want to fill your pockets. Now, how do you handle this part? So you prime them, okay? Sometimes the workers might not say what they are really feeling, right? Because of the, let's say, fear of getting fired. So what would you do? Well, you take an educated guess and bring the topic yourself. Hey, I don't want you to think that we are doing it for ourselves to fill our pockets, and bring that question up. Or let's say question up like, is that something that you guys are feeling? Okay, when you ask something like that, obviously someone would open up. Then you can take the bull by the horns, because now you're primed. But let's say if they were not thinking this, they were thinking something differently altogether, you gave them just another issue to rant about, and now there's a big problem. So you have to take an educated guess there, right? You can't really do anything there. So getting started, right? How do you take that conversation? Well, if there's a crucial conversation, there's another mnemonic for it. Okay, this is what we start with, ABCs. So when there's things getting heated up and you're trying to identify mutual purpose, you have to first identify that there's a mutual purpose, right? So which means that you agree with what they're saying, right? So you're both arguing on something, but there's a subtle point that you can find where you agree. So in a conversation, a lot of things happen, but there could always be something that you actually find that you can agree on. Start there. The book essentially suggests that people who are skilled at this, they never look for what's different. They look for first what's same, and they build from there. So the next part of that mnemonic is actually build. So when you agree on something, even the smallest of things, agree on it, recognize it, and then build from it. So now once you agreed, you build that conversation. Hey, I think we have some agreements on here. Let's talk about other things as well. Okay, so you build agreements. Okay, you start building agreements from ground up. So that's what it's talking about in terms of build. Then the last thing is C, which is compare. Now compare is saying that you don't ever say that the other person is wrong. Rather, you compare ideas all the time and do it through facts. So when you're comparing and never saying that the other person is wrong, and essentially I tend to do this all the time. Basically, I never really say the other person is wrong. I just say, okay, so you're saying this, and I'm saying this, and I feel this is the reason why I feel this would be good idea. You're saying that would be a good idea. What are your reasons behind it? Okay, so you are trying to compare now ideas, and you both are on the same term into solving another problem, which is basically which one is the best idea. So you've kind of taken the other person to your side, which the ABCs actually, right? The last part of the book is really talking about decision making. Let's say you had the crucial conversation. Now you have to make an important decision. How do you make an important decision? Well, there's four ways a decision can be made. Whether it is through command, consult, vote, or consensus, right? Command is where you are the boss, you know who cares. Let's say you're the person who cares about it that much, and you want to make sure that things are done a certain way, then obviously go with the command. The other part is consult, where you need expert advice from it, but the expert should know that their opinions don't make the decision. You will finally make the decision. So you still consult with them, but you make your own decision. Third one is vote, and vote is more not just about where you have made your decision, but you're still just taking a vote, and ultimately whoever agrees with you most, that ideas will go forward. No, you actually hold back your ideas and actually invite people to share ideas more and more in the pool of meaning, let's say, so that a vote can be drawn. Consensus may or may not always mean that everyone agrees. Consensus means that even if someone doesn't agree with it, they don't care enough to not go along with it. All right, so they should care less about it. So if everyone cares equally about it, then consensus might not be a good thing, because there's always going to be winners and losers. The whole idea of the book essentially is to make sure that people discuss as much as ideas as possible before they make any decision. All right, that's the goal of this book, and no one really goes without putting in their ideas and the best ideas possible forward. Okay, if you've gone through all of this of the video, then you pretty much have the handle of the entire book. If you want to really now think about how it all comes together, just read the chapter 10 of the book. It talks about putting it all together. If you watch this video, you kind of know the tools now, so you can just visit chapter 10 of the book, putting it all together, and read it, and you'll have a better understanding of every other concept. But the goal here is to apply things. If you don't apply, nothing's going to happen. So that was my or let's say summary of the book itself. Now let me share a couple of my takeaways or takes on the book. See, applying things, this particular thing, okay, this book, the ideas and techniques of this book is applicable in relationships where, as I said, you care that the relationship exists. You don't want to ruin the relationship, and the underlying assumption is that the other person is rational, reasonable, and doesn't want to do you any harm. Those two are the more, let's say, valuable assumption in this case. If you look at the author's backgrounds, most of them has not really worked in negotiation scenarios, okay, or they have not really closed deals, or let's say closed mergers or done mergers or acquisitions or things like that, where the other person may not want the best of you. They might want the best from you, right? Which means they don't really care as long as you can continue giving them your best, right? So the underlying assumption, if the underlying assumption doesn't hold true, that the people are good and sane and stuff like that, it doesn't work out. So the book in itself is more about handling relationships you care about, whether it's in your family, co-workers, office spaces, organizations in general, within the company, but not something to use against when you are dealing with other parties, third parties, okay, or dealing with competitors, something like that, okay, or dealing with or negotiating with another party. When that negotiating table comes forward, I don't think that the book, essentially the techniques described in the book and the assumptions described in it, hold true. If they don't hold true, you can't really apply this there. You might end up losing because you're operating under the assumption that they are saying they want the best for you, which is not true necessarily, right? I would honestly say John D. Rockefeller didn't become the richest person by considering that the other person was sane and he wanted the good for both of them. No. So in terms of building big businesses, all right, in general, okay, where you don't and it's not internal to your organization, okay, where it's cutthroat competition, there you might not be able to apply this, okay, but you absolutely can use the techniques for everything that matters to you in terms of relationship, where you want the relationship to sustain, which is basically friends and family, colleagues, your workers, employees, your business partners, people who have vested interest in you and you have vested interest in them, all right? So you want good for each other. That underlying assumptions should hold, and that's clearly my recommendation if someone is looking to even apply this book. Otherwise, if you're looking for something to apply in negotiation scenarios, this is not the book for you, okay? Don't use these techniques to in negotiation scenarios. You it may work, but it may also screw you really big time. So those were my key takeaways, and thanks for joining the first episode and watching the first episode. As I said, I had not defined like a script. I pretty much had my notes and I went through it. So hope you guys like it. We'll continue with another book next time. I'm not decided, but I'll keep you posted. See ya.